I think Braelon Allen is one of the top handcuffs just because we know that he is capable of those big plays. He is capable of getting a large workload as well.
He goes from being a boom bust wide receiver 4 to a boom bust wide receiver 3.
He's shown efficiency on his touches, over the last several weeks, and he's taken away some touches from James Conner.
Well, who scored more fantasy points last night, Dwayne? Because I think it was David Montgomery.
By 0.1.
Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. Happy Friday, everybody. I am your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great. It's a great day to break down some Thursday night football and all of the fantasy relevant injuries you need to know, even some handcuff RB chatter with our friend Faraz. So really going to be a great show on tap, and we appreciate you joining us. And by us, I mean, of course, myself and none other than a Fantasy Life Director of Analytics, all-around baller, Dwain "The Rock" McFarland. Mr. Dwain, how's it going?
It's going good. Another good Thursday night football game. I know that you prefer the brand of bad Thursday night football, and you're on the record with that. But I don't know, Hartitz. I'm getting pretty spoiled. Packers, Lions, great game. I mean, what a division. We got the NFL playoffs coming around. Everybody's trying to make their fantasy playoffs this weekend. Or if you're playing in a high stakes league, it might be your championship game with 6 teams on bye. So yeah, a lot to get into.
I'm coming around, man. I'll be honest, Dwayne. They're coming out with banger after banger. Again, Packers-Lions was great. 2 weeks before that, we had the Browns-Steelers snow game. Eagles-Commanders after that. That's a couple good teams. Bengals-Ravens 35-34 before that, man. Hell of a hot streak. But we'll stick with the present here. And again, go over that Lions 34-31 victory over the Packers. Shout out to Green Bay for making it competitive. They did cover as 3.5-point dogs. And all you over bettors certainly went home happy. That was resting out a lowly 53. So great game from Jared Goff. 283 passing and 3 touchdowns through the air. One bad pick to start the second half. But, we can't all be perfect out there. But the real story, Dwayne, was, this running back room, which, you know what? Roll a clip.
But I mean, are you really telling me, Ian, if you had to choose week in and week out, which guy you're going to start between Gibbs and Montgomery, and you had to make that decision every week, you're going to pick Monty?
One guy's getting twice as many touches as the other guys, Dwayne. That's all I'm saying.
One guy scoring more fantasy points.
Well, who scored more fantasy points last night, Dwayne? Because I think it was David Montgomery.
By 0.1. Hey, look, to be fair, if we count the 0.1 last night in the games where both guys have been healthy, and I'll even count the game where Jahmyr Gibbs probably was getting the business from his head coach for what happened on the whiteboard behind him. We've got 6 games where Jahmyr Gibbs has led the team in fantasy points. We've got 6 games where Monty has led in fantasy points. So, yeah. I like both. I was on the record yesterday saying I like both, but I would still pick Jahmyr Gibbs if I had to pick between the two every week. But it is a very close call.
I'm going to give myself the award for most petty victory lap. Again, 0.1 fantasy points more than Jahmyr Gibbs. Yes, you guys were happy to start both, all jokes aside, but I did enjoy that going down. And what was even funnier about it, Dwayne, was that Gibbs actually did end up out-touching Montgomery last night. So process not particularly the soundest from your boy, but we will, again, go ahead and get that lap anyway. So great game by both Lions running backs. They continue to be staples inside of lineups of all shapes and sizes. Also a great game from Mr. Tim Patrick, 2 receiving touchdowns. First time he's found the end zone since 2021. Great story coming back from injury. Unfortunately, that did take away from our one true sun god. Just 43, I believe, scoreless yards on 6 targets. That is true. A little bit better for Jameson Williams with 80 yards and Sam Laporta with 54. So that was the Lions. They have now ripped off 10 straight wins, I believe. 12-1 on the season now. Great day to be a Lions fan, Dwayne. But also the Packers, again, showed it well for themselves. Still sitting at 9-4. Still very much a very good football team. However, Jaden Reed, not still very much in our good graces. What was that, Dwayne?
Yeah, man, it's a hard offense to predict, especially, besides Josh Jacobs. We'll talk about him in a second. He's getting all the work in the backfield. But when we talk about the wide receivers, we talk about the tight ends, it's a boom bust group, right? We've got a good passing attack that we like, but man, they don't have any one of these guys clearly leading the way every week or in most weeks. It is truly like a peanut butter spread. You're just evenly across the piece of toast. Jaden Reed's going to get a little. Christian Watson's going to get some. Romeo Dobbs is going to get some when he's healthy. Dontavian Wicks even gets a little bit. Obviously, Tucker Kraft involved. But yeah, last night was not ideal for Mr. Jaden Reed. A 7% targets per route run, 63% route participation rate. They were using those 2 tight end sets quite a bit. Really interesting choice, right? By the Packers. They're like, okay, Lions, you guys want to be tough. You can stop the run. We're going to come out and actually use our 12 personnel more than we normally do. And we are going to try to jam it down your throat successfully. Josh Jacobs didn't have the best average, but he did punch in another 3 touchdowns. So yeah, looking at the passing game group, Ian, it's just really hard each week. I mean, it's not that you can't start them. You just have to level set expectations. You could either get a real nice boom week or you could get a dud. And even if you look at the week before with Jaden Reed, whenever he came through with 19.7 fantasy points, it was still pretty thin, man. He caught the 2 touchdown passes, he had 23% target share in that game, but it wasn't like he came through with a lot of yards. I mean, it's been a tricky situation for Jaden Reed for about the last 6 or 7 weeks in fantasy. He's kind of just become another one of the guys in Green Bay versus early on in the year. We kind of felt like he was the lead option.
3 or fewer targets in 4 of his last 6 games. It's almost like with Deebo Samuel, Dwayne, who honestly, we've now actually seen Reed take over that mantle as the NFL's leading wide receiver rusher from Deebo this year. I just can't believe he can't get 3 to 4 design touches per game. I'm not saying he needs 12 targets out there, man, but when you can do everything Reed can do on a football field, it doesn't make sense to me. But of course, Matt LaFleur does know a thing or two about football, so we'll let him keep on keeping on. And accordingly, Christian Watson, $114 through the air on 7 targets, caught a nice bomb in the second half. Good to see him get back on the right track. Dontavian Wicks even had his 2nd most receiving yards of the year, just 49, but still a step in the right direction. And you mentioned those tight ends. Well, they were led by Tucker Kraft, 41 yards and a touchdown. Could have had a second one. Unfortunately, Jordan Love sailed that.
Uncovered again.
Scored. I know he was uncovered, but
no player more uncovered than this guy, than Tucker Kraft.
He's a beast, though, Dwayne. Did you see the kip up? His little.
Dude. I've said all along, I love Tucker Kraft, like just watching the athlete. But man, he definitely gets the benefit of being left wide open, and he got nailed twice. Early in the game, he got one of those normal little checkdowns where everybody just forgets about him. And it was the safety, I believe, for the line. I think it was Branch. I can't remember. But, man, just completely lit him up. He popped up quick from that one, too.
It was funny. I tweeted something about that, and someone was like, don't let Dwayne see this. But the funny part was he was also kind of wide open when he caught that ball, Dwayne. So you are not wrong. Otherwise, shout out Josh Jacobs. 3 touchdowns in his last 6 games now, 127 touches and 10 touchdowns. First 7 games of the year, 136 touches and just 2 touchdowns. Touchdown regression continues to be a hell of a drug. So again, congrats to the Lions. I was wrong earlier. Not 10 straight, but 11 straight. That is a franchise record. So great day for Dan Campbell and company. And gotta love some good Thursday night football. So guys, getting into some injury report goodness now, but first a quick word to our friends over at Game Time. Dwayne, we both know there's nothing like being at a game in person, whether it's, getting some hot dogs out there at a baseball game, going to a hockey game and yelling obscenities at people who are trying to fight each other, going to a good old-fashioned fight, whatever it may be. Live sports absolutely rule, and accordingly, Game Time is my go-to for finding amazing tickets, but not just for sports, also for concerts and shows too. I was actually scrolling the Game Time app the other day, and I came across this new feature called Game Time Picks, and it is a total game changer. Game Time Picks curates your experience, showing you the best deals on great seats, and they make it so easy, it's truly a no-brainer, people. Seriously, Game Time takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets. All you have to do to find out for yourself is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LIFE, L-I-F-E, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, all you got to do is download that Game Time app, create an account, redeem code LIFE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Those old Under Armour commercials were awesome. Game Time's awesome too. I'm ready to run through a brick wall, Dwayne. Unfortunately, some of these players are not, because they are dealing with various injuries that we are going to, again, get through right now. Kicking things off with the ever-important running back position here in Fantasyland. And Dwayne, yes, we saw the man banged up and playing through the pain last week. However, following a slightly different practice schedule this time around, Jets RB1 Breece Hall starting off the week with back-to-back DMPs. Might be time for the Braelon Allen show in New York.
Yeah, and anytime we have a team that's out of it, like the Jets, the chances increase of a team, wanting to rest, especially a young player they know they're going to have on their roster next year. You don't want to risk further injury. Not that would even be the case, depending on what the injury is here, but still, there's just no reason to really chance it. So I think there is a chance that we see Braelon Allen as the starter this weekend. And Ian, I got to say, while I wouldn't put him quite where I have Breece Hall, just because like we haven't seen, the passing down chops that we've seen from Hall. He would definitely at least be a mid-range running back 2, potentially a high-end running back 2, depending on how much you like the matchup. It is a positive matchup against the Dolphins. Now, the Jets would need to keep this game, in a situation where they could continue to run it. Right now, the Dolphins, they're 6 or 7 point favorites in the game. So, that could be a little bit of an issue for him. But the Dolphins are the 8th best matchup for opposing running backs. They offer a 3.3 point fantasy boost per game to the position. So it's a decent matchup. We just need to keep the game close. I would say mid-range running back 2, probably starting though, for a lot of people out there, especially given all the injuries. I know you and I would love to have Braelon Allen on a few squads right now.
I am with you, man. I was going through the rosters yesterday, and yeah, it actually would help us out quite a bit. So Breece Hall in our Fantasy Life ranks, which everyone can find over at FantasyLife.com. Both of our RB13. I'm kind of surprised to be saying this, Dwayne. I think we'd probably just be crossing him out and putting Braelon Allen there. That would put him ahead of guys like Najee Harris, Aaron Jones, Rico Dowdle, James Conner. Do you agree?
Yeah, I'm a little bit lower just because we know Breece Hall has got that passing game prowess. We don't know for sure if Braelon Allen would get some of the targets we've gotten from Breece, but hey, that hasn't been a big part of his game recently. Like, it's just all funneling through Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson for the most part in the passing game. But still, I think a little bit lower, but I think same ballpark. Like I said, mid-range running back 2. Right now, I've got Breece Hall as a high-end running back 2. But I wouldn't argue with you. I wouldn't come knock on your door over in Rome, Ian, if I saw you put Breece Hall at running back 13 and tell you that you have to move him down.
And remember, as much as I do agree with everything you said previously, Dwayne, pretty much a lost season for the Jets. It is a lost season for the Jets at this point. Wouldn't it make sense to run your young RB into the ground? They did give him 39 touches in the meaningless Week 18 game last year. So don't completely rule it out. But again, one of the bigger injuries to watch here as we get into the weekend. Similar sentiment here for that, Tampa Bay backfield, Dwayne, because Bucky Irving, back-to-back DNPs to start the week, dealing with that hip and back injury. Looked fantastic out there last week, but also was limping around quite a bit. I tend to think with Tampa Bay, who has been, very willing to rest some of their star players in practice throughout the year, I'm hopeful that Bucky is going to get some participation in Friday and ultimately play, whether he has a questionable tag or not, but not a given, Dwayne. And accordingly, RB needy teams out there, maybe take a little bit of a look at Sean Tucker.
Yeah, Sean Tucker would definitely move into that borderline running back 2 territory and could completely obliterate that, right? If this turned into a split backfield between him and Rachaad White in this particular matchup against the Raiders, we would feel really good about that. He would have a chance to put up running back 1 numbers. This is a guy, when he's gotten his opportunities this year, Ian, he's been very good with them. He's been a pretty good kick returner too. And I don't know if you've seen some of that film, but he's got some nice moves, got some power. So this is a guy that can play. He showed it in college. He's shown it in the few opportunities that he's gotten in the NFL, and we love the Bucs offense right now. They're also a team that is really trying. They want to win. They're trying to make the playoffs right now. They're a little behind the Falcons just due to the tiebreaker, but they're both sitting at 6-6. So, destiny really is in Tampa Bay's hands. If they win out, or they just at least, win most of the games they have remaining on their schedule, they got a shot for the playoffs. So they're highly incentivized to perform well. We like the player. I would also say with Rachaad White, how high would you move him? I'm thinking probably, I've got James Cook at running back 10, Kyron's at running back 9. You're a little higher on Kyron than me this week. I got Bucky Irving at 7. I don't think I would quite get there because Bucky's just been so electric. Rachaad White's not been. But man, I'm thinking right around like that James Cook borderline. We're about to talk Kenneth Walker. He's dealing with his own injury, but I'm thinking sandwich right around that James Cook, Kenneth Walker range, which would mean low end running back 1 for Rachaad White, who has played better, honestly. Since Bucky's been playing so hot, it's kind of lit a little bit of fire under Mr. Rachaad White.
I think you're right, man. Again, we talked about Breece Hall being RB13, kind of crossing him out for Braelon Allen. I would start Rachaad White over Braelon Allen if that goes ahead and goes down, which means that we would be inside of that top 12. So Rachaad White certainly becomes someone we're feeling good about. And then with Sean Tucker, man, really has been making the most out of his opportunities all season long. 6.3 yards per carry, leads all Buccaneers running backs. And the guy's also converted 9 targets into 8 catches for 104 yards and a touchdown. So had that blow up, when he did get a chance earlier this season. And accordingly, Dwayne, looking at your ranks right now, Travis Etienne, RB24, Jalen Warren, RB25, Pacheco's RB26. Those are tough. I think I lean towards those 3 over Sean Tucker, but, Gus Edwards, Jerome Ford, I think that's where I'm probably gambling with Tucker.
I'm going to gamble with Tucker over ETN. I like the Buccaneers better. And I think he's going to get at least 40% of the work, maybe 50% of the work. And to your point, he's shown to be efficient. I think where it gets tricky is like Chuba. We hate the matchup for Chuba. We know that Chuba is probably going to get more work, but I think I lean Sean Tucker, man. I just think he has more upside. He's not guaranteed the same number of touches, but we like the matchup more. I like the offense more. I think he just has other things working in his favor. So I think I'm putting him in there ahead of all those guys. So I think he's probably into that low end running back 2 range for me. I think there are some that are close calls. You guys will have to make some of those decisions on your own, but he's in that tier. So I think he belongs in that tier, but I would play him over ETN and Chuba Hubbard.
Dwain maybe a little bit higher than myself there, but yeah, I don't think I can go lower than RB 27-ish range. So not too far off. And again, a nice guy for any RB needy teams out there. Talk about Kenneth Walker, Dwain, someone you mentioned briefly before, dealing with ankle and calf injuries. Wasn't concerned going into the week, kicking off with a limited session on Wednesday, but we hate seeing those midweek downgrades, and he accordingly did not practice on Thursday. So we were, chopping up before the show, noting about how the Seahawks are one of the more unique teams out there in terms of their practice participation. You'll see guys get downgraded, miss practice on Wednesday and Thursday, and then all of a sudden be fine and not even carry a designation into the weekend. But again, Dwain did want to call this one out because we hate seeing those downgrades. And as we saw during weeks 2 and 3 this year, God forbid KW3 is out, all of a sudden Zach Charbonnet is looking at a true workhorse role.
Yeah, I mean, we can go back and look at those games, and it was all about Zach Charbonnet. He had a 95% and an 85% snap share. This would all go through him. The first game, he gave you 17.9 fantasy points. The next week, he popped off for 25.7. So he would actually be an upgrade from where we have Kenneth Walker, because right now, as much as Walker is controlling the backfield, he does have to share some of it with Charbonnet. Yeah. So if we have a situation where Kenneth Walker's out, like Charbonnet is going to get all of it, like what we just talked about. So I'm just sitting here looking at the ranks right now. I've got Kenneth Walker sitting there as my running back 13. My running back 11. You got him running back 12. I would play Charbonnet over James Cook versus the Rams. It's going to be hard to get him higher than that, because then you run into Kyren Williams against the Bills. I probably still lean Kyren, but he's right there. He would be right there in the same tier with Kyren Williams and James Cook. And slightly above like Breece Hall or Braelon Allen, whoever's playing. But I would play him over Braelon Allen.
I think I'd play him over Bucky.
Oh, yeah? Man, I don't know. Man, Bucky's just running so hot. But I think you're right. The argument's there. I mean, the argument's definitely there. I think he's in that tier. Just Bucky, man, is like playing so well. And I like Tampa's offense still better than the way the Seahawks are playing right now. We've seen the Seahawks have some good games. They've just been they've been shaky here recently.
Legit top 10 running back. So whether you want to say he's RB8, RB9.
He's in your lineup.
Exactly. So someone who might not be in our lineup, though, Bears RB DeAndre Swift dealing with a quad injury that has left him sidelined both Wednesday and Thursday. And additionally, Roschon Johnson out with a concussion, not confirmed yet, but has even got a limited session in this week. So seemingly on the wrong side of questionable right now. Maybe Travis Homer season, Dwain. I don't think Roschon's going to play. Swift, I would not be as surprised if he gets a limited session and plays through the pain. Was dealing with some issues a couple weeks ago where he missed an early week practice as well. But, I don't think we're putting Travis Homer in our top 10. But, hey, man, I know we got some lineups out there where we've had to actually look at Israel Abanaconda as a potential play. So, at a minimum, I think Homer is, taking that cake.
Homer kind of turns into like the Amir Abdullah of the last few weeks, right? You're not crazy about it. You're not going to necessarily, be like, pounding the table that you're getting to put this guy in your lineup, but he's going to have a chance to be out there 65, 70% of the snaps. And anytime you get that, Ian, you can run into 15 to 20 fantasy points. So it's hard to project it. It's hard to say that it's for sure going to happen, but you've said it many, many times. Volume is king. And when we look at the rest of that depth chart, we've got Kenny McIntosh. Is he... I think it would just be mostly Travis Homer. I mean, at this point. So McIntosh, I would say he would be. Oh, yeah.
Demetrius Felton. You're good. Demetrius Felton.
Yeah, my bad. Yeah. So, like, looking at it, I'm just looking right now, like, probably in that Kareem Hunt. Like, I'm playing him over Gus Edwards. Gus Edwards against the Chiefs. No, thank you. I'm playing him over Jerome Ford, playing him over Tank Bigsby, clearly over all those guys. I think where it gets interesting is when you get to the names like I would probably play him over Kareem Hunt. because we already saw Isaiah Pacheco force a split last week, so that could even lean more in Pacheco's favor. Like Nick Chubb, Pacheco, Jalen Warren. Are you playing him over any of those guys? Probably not.
I don't think
Probably
so. That's where my line is. Yeah, I have Rashad White right now, RB27. Maybe could bump him up a little bit. And after that, it goes Gus, Hunt, Gainwell, Ray Davis. I'm putting him ahead of those guys. But basically, the lowest ranked kind of starting running back that we would have available this week would go to Travis Homer. But I'm really not worried about Demetric Felton. It is funny you kind of mentioned Kenny McIntosh because they're very similar, very much pass-first players. I mean, Felton had more targets than he did carries during his time in Cleveland. So I do think, he said 60, 70% snaps. I'd say that's the floor for Homer, man. If he's out there for 90% plus, man, really wouldn't be the most surprising thing. But again, with all these backfield injuries, maybe the answer is just Caleb Williams throwing the ball that much more often. So good stuff there. Only other RB notes I wanted to quickly bring up, though, could see the return of Saints running back Kendre Miller, been on IR with that hamstring injury, but he is practicing in full. Another good bench stash to potentially have down the rest of the way, because who else are the Saints going to give the ball to at this point? Also note that we will need to keep an eye on Raheem Mostert, been limited with a hip injury. Alexander Madison still limited with an ankle issue, as is Zamir White, not practicing with a quad. And even Amir Abdullah was a late addition to the injury report on Thursday with that foot injury. So all the stars starting to align for Sincere McCormick, someone where, again, I think we're probably more on the Travis Homer side of things, not cracking our top 10 by any stretch of the imagination, but only maybe 25 to 27 running backs we could theoretically rank higher than him. And also, we'll just sadly remind everyone that, yes, CMC and Jordan Mason on IR, done for the season, and thus Isaac Garendo becomes an upside RB2 play. So good stuff there, Dwayne. That said, we have plenty of wide receiver goodness to get to. And by goodness, I mean sad injuries. But yeah, first a quick word to our friends at New Era. Getting my Miami Dolphins hat on. As much as I, like the Dolphins colors, like their vibes, I do miss that Dolphin that just had a scowl on his face, and had the football helmet, but still a cool hat right now anyways. I want to appreciate New Era for that. And guess what, guys? You can stand for change with New Era Cap, the official cap of the NFL. The Inspired Change collection is part of their commitment with the NFL to break barriers and create opportunities in communities of color. With Black Team logo set against official team color crowns and finished with the first ever on-field pin, this collection is for the change makers. Join the movement with the official cap of the NFL, now available at New Era Cap. And yeah, guys, the NFL does not profit from the sale of Inspired Change products. Charitable contributions are awarded by the NFL Foundation directly to NFL's Inspired Change nonprofit partners. For more information, please visit www.nfl.com/inspiredchange. Shout out New Era and shout out Lab McConkey, Dwayne, someone who, again, is dealing with that knee injury, been someone that's been a little bit banged up, but seemingly on the right side of questionable. He's been limited back-to-back practices to start this week, so hopeful he's going to be there. However, not such good news for one DK Metcalf. Again, back-to-back DMPs to start the week, dealing with that shoulder injury. Luckily, though, we did see this last week, and he wound up playing through the pain and got out there with a full session. So I guess the question here, Dwayne, would be, do you think the shoulder issue, which is clearly present, is prevalent enough to basically continue to make Jackson Smith and the Jigba the number one in Seattle?
Well, last week we actually saw DK. He didn't come through with a huge fantasy box score, but he led the team with a 32% target share, despite, to your point, missing 2 practices and then coming back and practicing and playing in the game. Could it be limiting him? Potentially. I would rather be dealing with an upper body injury versus a lower body injury, though, for the wide receiver position. So I'm not going to worry about it too much. Assuming he suits up, going to keep him in the same range in the ranks. But if we did have a situation for some reason, if DK didn't play this week, that would mean a slight bump up the ranks for Jackson Smith and Jigba. I'm already sitting at 14, Ian. You're sitting at 17. You're playing against the Cardinals. That's a neutral matchup for opposing wide receivers. If you look at Jackson Smith and Jigba, over these last several games here, if you look at the games with and without DK Metcalf, you can see on the screen, his targets do jump from 7.7 to 10 per game. And then the yards per game, obviously, we had the one monster game that's blowing that number up at 124.5. But I would probably say I would get him up to like wide receiver 10-ish. I've got CeeDee Lamb at 10 right now versus the Bengals. You've got Lamb at 9. I think that's about where I would look at JSN. I don't know that I could push him higher than that, but he would certainly be inside my top 10. He's already knocking on the door for me anyway, but he would definitely be in my top 10 if we had a situation where DK Metcalf didn't play.
About to say, knocking on the door, and accordingly, I got my wiener dog Lily barking, so maybe I do need to get him in the top 10 because if that's not a sign, I don't know what is. So again, not great. He hasn't been practicing, but DK should be good to go here for Sunday. Not quite as confident, though, in DJ Moore, Dwain, dealing with a quad injury. So many quad issues in Chicago. What is going on, medical staff? But he has not practiced to start this week. So we did have Keenan Allen also not practicing on Wednesday. However, he got a full session in on Thursday while dealing with his own ankle issues. So DJ Moore, Dwain, does seem tentatively to actually be questionable. And accordingly, if he's out and we have some running backs out, God forbid, maybe Rome Odunze comes through for the boys.
Yeah, well, I mean, first, I think you would say Keenan Allen is a lock. I mean, he's got 22.6 and 24.3 fantasy points over the last 2 games. If we go back and we look at him since week 7, coming out of that bye week, he has got a 28% target share, leading the team. Turns out fat Keenan Allen isn't just fat Keenan Allen. He's still just Keenan Allen. He just hadn't had quarterback play. Caleb Williams playing better. You've talked about it. The Bears are airing it out over these last few games. Probably just wanting to go ahead and see what they got in Mr. Caleb Williams, letting him get some more reps. Why not? What's the point now? And just continue to try to pound the rock with where you're sitting in the season. So Keenan, man, playing really well right now. For him, I would, if we didn't have DJ Moore available, I've got Keenan right now sitting there as wide receiver 29. You're wide receiver 28. How did I let that happen? I would say moving him, well, clearly above Jaden Reed, who just crapped the bed. So we can at least get him past him, Ian.
Isn't that fun, Dwayne, real quick? Like when we're editing rankings on Sunday, like you see someone who already, had a horrible Thursday night. You're like, well, yeah, I'm for sure going to push that guy down.
It's an easy way to know. So like when you guys see players moving down the ranks that have already played, it's usually due to other players moving ahead of them. Like what Ian said, it does become an easy line to know, well, I know I can at least get him past Jaden Reed. I think where it gets interesting is, would you play Keenan Allen over Garrett Wilson? We have Garrett Wilson as a borderline wide receiver 2 this week at wide receiver 23 and 24.
Yeah, I think without too much of a problem, man. What about like Juwan Jennings, someone you have wide receiver 18? I just feel like Keenan, if DJ is out, man, he's almost a lock for double-digit targets.
Yeah, and it's a better matchup for Keenan than it would be for Juwan Jennings. So I agree with you. So we would keep climbing. That would, for me, that would put him ahead of Devontae Adams, Brian Thomas Jr., Ladd McConkey, DK Metcalf, then Juwan Jennings, then you get to Tyreek Hill, who you've got higher. But I think right in that range, Juwan Jennings, the only reason I have him so high, man, is just because like he's got like a 30% target share in his healthy game. Yeah. So it's like he's getting a ton of volume, but the matchup's definitely better for Keenan. It's at least a neutral matchup. Juwan Jennings got to face the Bears, who are the second toughest matchup for opposing wide receivers per our DVP tool, where you guys can go check out those fantasy boosts. Not ideal. So yeah, I think that we're talking mid-range wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside for Keenan. So where are you at on Odunze? I'm scrolling down. No. I've actually got a page. No, I don't have to page over. I've got him wide receiver 42 right now. You're 48. So here's the interesting thing about Rome. I know we've talked about him. He has not necessarily come through. But the silver lining is the underlying data has been there. Number one, over these last few weeks since the change at offensive coordinator, they're using more 11 personnel. They're not using the 2 tight end stuff. Essentially, Gerald Everett has been the forgotten man. It's just the 3 wide receivers plus Cole Kmet. So the playing time's been there. He's been over 90% route participation. And the targets have been decent. He's behind DJ Moore. He's behind Keenan Allen. But it's not like he's sitting there at a 15% target share. He's at 22%. Over the last 4 games. And when you look at his air yards, he's tied for the team lead there over the last 4 games. So those data points just tell you that if somehow he and Caleb worked out the chemistry stuff, even if it's just for 1 game, like, and not the rest of the season, there's definitely boom potential. And man, we're not that worried about the 49ers defense is just so banged up, man. It's like at worst, it's a neutral matchup, right? I mean, it's just not a tough matchup at this point in the season. So I would definitely move Rome Odunze ahead of Jalen Waddle, DeAndre Hopkins. That's where it's like, do you like DeAndre Hopkins or do you like Rome?
I think I'd lean Hopkins, but I was just about to say you have Waddle, wide receiver 36. I would get Rome inside my top 36. We're playing him ahead of the Nick Westbrook-Akinis, Adam Thielens, MVSs of the world, because, again, he goes from being this boomer bust wide receiver 4 to, I think, actually a rock-solid wide receiver 3.
It goes from being a boom bust wide receiver 4 to a boom bust wide receiver 3.
Probably a better way of putting that for sure. So, unfortunately, guys, this game is in San Francisco, so it's going to be that pesky late afternoon start. So, again, if we do have some game time decisions, make sure you're putting your earlier players in your wide receiver spots. Leave that flexibility for you in case we do have to make some tough choices with these Bears wide receivers. So, last one we did want to talk about, Dwayne, is the return of one Devontae Smith, who missed the last few weeks with that hamstring injury, has been practicing in full all week and does look good to go here for Sunday. Matchup is fantastic at home against the Panthers, but the question, as really has been the case all year in Philly, is just how many targets can we expect for the guy, considering, Saquon Barkley might run for 600 yards.
Yeah, not very many, but we have the highest team total on the slate, so there's an opportunity for a bonanza of touchdowns, which Devonta Smith, we know, can get in on that, right? He could easily come up with 2 of those. We don't have Dallas Goedert, so that definitely helps him. You're going to have some big playability. The Panthers are going to have to completely load up to try to stop Saquon Barkley. I think you're going to get some one-on-one shots down the field. They have given Devonta Smith time to fully recover, so I don't think he should be dealing with any sort of injury that's, holding him back in this game. Obviously, A.J. Brown is the alpha here. And that makes things tougher. And you already mentioned it. They don't have to really pass the ball a lot. But again, a lot of points could be scored by the Eagles. So I put Devonta Smith into that boom bust wide receiver 3 range. I've got him wide receiver 32. You're sitting at wide receiver 35. I don't see myself moving him that much, but he's in a tier of guys here. Again, you got Darnell Mooney sitting around him, Deebo Samuel sitting around him. Cedric Tillman, if he were to play, is kind of sitting in that range. Yep. There's a group of guys, Jalen Waddle's kind of in that range, where it's really hard to say for sure which one is going to go off. That's the big point here. But I think he probably carries the most ceiling out of a lot of those guys, just because the Eagles are expected to score so many points against the Panthers.
Good reminder, again, evaluate your matchup. If you're favored to win 70% to 30%, you probably should be taking the safer running back versus someone like Devonta Smith. Actually, I have one of my best friends reach out with his lineup last night, Dwayne, and he had Tracy in there, and he said he was a big favorite. And I was like, I think you're good with Tracy there, but if you wanted that upside, Jaden Reed might be hanging out for you. And sadly, he made that switch. So sorry, Brandon, but hopefully, again, you can, keep on keeping on throughout the weekend. So other wide receiver notes I did want to quickly run over for you guys, though. Guys who should be good after practicing in full all week: Demarcus Robinson. Allen Lazard should be back. Don't look now. He's actually been more productive than Devontae Adams with the Jets. That is so sad to say out loud. Also, Calvin Austin did get a full session in on Thursday, seemingly on his way to clearing the concussion protocol. A little bit more limited and questionable. We did have Lad McConkey, but as I said, the fact that he is limited in back-to-back sessions to start the week, good news for his chances of suiting up on Sunday night. But given that is Sunday night, definitely have a backup plan ready, God forbid, if he is a game time decision. Also, Jamar Chase kicking off the week with a limited session ahead of Monday Night Football. Not overly concerned, but it is Jamar Chase and it is Monday Night Football, so at least monitor that. Malik Neighbors, Dwayne, can we just sit this guy out on Thursday practices? This is probably the 3rd or 4th time this year that I've seen him added on Thursday. However, it is the same groin issue that I guess has been an issue throughout the season. So tentatively not super concerned about it, but keep an eye on it. That would really suck if we do lose Neighbors for this week, but I am optimistic that the injury gods aren't going to screw us over that bad. Tyreek Hill, Parker Washington, Jalen Coker, Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, other guys that have been limited and seem at least a little bit questionable here for their respective week 14 matchups. Guys who have not been practicing, though: CeeDee Lamb ahead of Monday Night Football. However, he did say he should be fine for Monday night, so not too worried about him. Mike Evans has not practiced to start the week, but similar to Bucky Irving, wouldn't be surprised if this is a bit more maintenance than anything. However, in addition to that hamstring designation, they do have a calf on there as well. Also, Jacoby Myers, a late addition to the injury report on Thursday. I am a little bit skeptical because the Raiders added Aiden O'Connell, Jacoby Myers and Amir Abdullah as DMPs on Thursday. So I almost wonder if it's a little bit more of a rest thing, at least for Jacoby and Amir. But hey, is listed with the ankle, so keep an eye on that. You mentioned Cedric Tillman. He has not been practicing all week. That is not good. However, Elijah Moore and Jerry Jeudy are good to go. So we'll get nice bumps again if Cedric is indeed out. Also, Tyler Boyd went from a limited session to a DMP. All the stars continue to align for our one true king, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. And yeah, that actually is going to wrap up our wide receiver goodness here. So, Dwayne, we do have some quick quarterback and tight end things to run through, but honestly, both positions have been a pretty good spot. I mentioned the Aiden O'Connell DMP, just an illness though, so not too concerned about that. Trevor Lawrence obviously out for the season. We talked about that yesterday with him going on IR. And then at tight end, we should see the return of Jake Ferguson on Monday Night Football. He has cleared the concussion protocol. Tyler Higbee and Josh Oliver also could be making their returns, just again kind of moving around that target share in those Rams and Vikings offenses. Also, keep an eye on the Saints. Juwan Johnson has been limited with the foot issue. Obviously, Taysom Hill out for the season, but hopefully Juwan is not hurt. Otherwise, I would be in trouble in a number of fantasy leagues. But he's been limited all week, so tentatively optimistic there. Also could see the return of Jatavian Sanders come back from that neck issue. He's been limited all week. Wouldn't it be great for our guy Tommy Tremble's out here? But also, Dwayne, the big one that you mentioned, Dallas Goedert not practicing at all. And I mean, we got the word earlier in the week that short-term IR could be a realistic option here. So Grant Calcaterra will be the next guy up, and he's had a full-time role. But more than anything, Dwayne, we would just expect a lot more targets to be funneled to our guys AJB and Devonta Smith.
Yeah, it's a bump for both of those guys if Goddard is out. I think the biggest news there is, like, and you mentioned it, Aiden O'Connell is just an illness, so hopefully it's nothing. But we have a guy that I'm about to be talking about here in our bold calls that they would not be good for. If Aiden O'Connell was out and we had Desmond Ridder in there, I would definitely have to reverse course on the name that we are about to talk about.
Again, guys, all that injury information will be reflected in our Fantasy Life ranks, but we want to dive a little bit deeper on some potential injury ramifications. Very special guest coming up, Faraz Siddiqi over with Upper Hand Fantasy. But first, before we get to some Handcuff RB discourse, I want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at DraftKings. Grab your favorite team's jersey and some snacks and head to the couch for another Sunday of action-packed football. You can get even closer to the action with my partners at DraftKings, because right now, all new DraftKings customers who bet just $5 will get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using the promo code FANTASYLIFE. The crown is yours. That's right. New customers get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins after betting just $5. And the sports betting is not yet available in your state. Don't worry, you can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use the promo code FANTASYLIFE and bet just $5 on any wager to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. That's promo code FANTASYLIFE only at DraftKings Sportsbook. All right, guys, time for a very special segment. No longer just Dwayne and myself, because we have a very special guest, none other than Faraz Siddiqi, a.k.a. the mastermind behind Upper Hand Fantasy. Make sure you shoot them a follow, especially over on Instagram, and also check out the Upper Hand Fantasy podcast. Faraz, thank you for joining the Fantasy Life show, man. How's it going?
Great. Doing really well. I'm excited for fantasy playoffs. We're here. I mean, there are a couple of my teams where I got to kind of win and get in, maybe with a little bit of luck. But it's exciting nonetheless. I was sweating a little bit in yesterday's game. I was going up against Josh Jacobs. But Jared Goff came through. I had a tough decision between him and Jameis Winston last night, and I went Goff. I thought that, I thought he could get it done. He got the 3 touchdowns, so I'm happy.
Feeling good about that, man. Dwayne and I are right there with you on some of those tough decisions, though. I had to message Dwayne last night saying, hey, I think we might have a chance to get Sincere McCormick out here to save the day. So you're down bad when you're talking about Sincere McCormick. But, hey, it does go to show you, man, a lot of running backs in the NFL, just 1 or 2 injuries away from all of a sudden being on the top of our wish list. And accordingly, we're talking some handcuff RBs here with Faraz. And want to start things out, man, with Titans RB2. However, as we heard the entire offseason, thought of as more of a 1B. So Faraz, God forbid something happens to Tony Pollard. What are your thoughts on Tajay Spears?
I do think he'll be a 3-down handcuff, but the thing is that the elephant in the room is the guy just hasn't been able to stay healthy for more than maybe a 2-game stretch, 3-game stretch, maybe. It would be so fantasy football of him to be the healthiest he's ever been if Tony Pollard were to go down, right? And I think there's no doubt that we'd be racing to pick up we were racing to go pick him up if Pollard were to go down. So, playoff schedule's relatively solid. Cincy, Indy, Jacksonville, especially that juicy Week 17 matchup against Jacksonville if Pollard were to go down. So, is he worth rostering? I think so. Maybe he might not be my favorite handcuff if there are several guys out there, but I think Tyjae Spears definitely falls into that that potential every down guy if Pollard were to go down.
So one other one
where, yeah, go ahead, John. Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, Ian.
Yeah, for us, I mean, we've seen Spears out of the equation, and Pollard's kind of been this top 12, top 13 RB. Like, I get it, man. It's an offense we don't exactly love. So is it as easy as maybe just kind of scratching Pollard's name out and then putting Spears there, or one of these guys where, again, we're happy to have him on the squad, but we are talking about the Titans?
Yeah, no, totally. But, the fact that I think, Tyjae Spears, I would say, is a plus in the receiving game. So, even if the Titans do end up going down, have bad game scripts and things like that, I think he will be somebody who's going to be on the field. And Pollard, he's been good this year, right? On an offense that doesn't have too many great pieces. Like him and Calvin really have been holding it down. And even with the games with Spears, Pollard has been holding it down. So I do think Spears, can be efficient enough, with those touches to get it done, as an RB2. So I think he is worth stashing, especially in deeper leagues where most of the, I guess, more valuable handcuffs I would say are already rostered.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So flipping over to another team that we felt way better about probably a month ago than what I would say how we feel about the Titans right now would be the Atlanta Falcons. They have slipped a little bit, right? And I think a lot of that is Kirk Cousins. We've had a bad kind of 3-game stretch from him, but Bijan Robinson, man, has just absolutely dominated the backfield. His role has really grown over the last month. He's averaging 21 fantasy points per game. So that's kind of taken away any standalone value for Tyler Algier that we saw a little bit earlier in the season. You didn't know for sure when you would get it, but you're like, well, if I had to jam him into my flex, I might hit 10, 12 fantasy points. Not getting that as much right now, but still looks like the clear-cut number 2 behind Bijan. So what are your thoughts on Mr. Algier?
Yeah, I think he's one of the top handcuffs, I would say. Yes, this offense isn't as good as it was a few weeks ago. I was just rewatching that game. What is going on with Kirk Cousins' arm? Like that pick six on the sideline, that thing was going like 5 miles per hour. I don't know what was going on there. But I guess that's a good thing for the running backs. Maybe some extra checkdowns to Bijan and that sort of thing. But Tyler Algier, he hasn't been as efficient like this year, last year, as he was his rookie season. And here's the thing, though. If Bijan were to ever go down, he can handle a 20-plus touch workload. He's going to be that guy. He was already taking touches away from Bijan earlier in the season. I think it took I think it was 3 chances at the goal line a few weeks ago where he did make it. They bring in Bijan on 4th down. He gets it in. That was the last straw, right? Okay. They're like, okay, I think we get it now. You know what I'm saying? So I'm happy that series of events happened. Bijan got the touchdown, and Tyler Algier basically never had that role ever again since then. So happy about that. But I do think Algier, will he become an every down back? I think that remains to be seen. Is he a plus in the receiving game? That remains to be seen. Will he be the guy on every passing down and that sort of thing? That remains to be seen. But I do think Algier 20-plus touches pretty easily, if they were to go down, and that offensive line, is solid enough to hopefully maintain some efficiency for him like it has for Bijan.
And that is the one thing we're always trying to look for with these handcuffs. They're not all created equal. So at a minimum, having that theoretical 3-down ability is so huge. Algier certainly has that in spades. But yeah, thank God they've gotten him off the goal line finally in recent weeks, man. Certainly a highlight of the Shoosh report from there. Someone that we don't have to worry about losing goal line touches, and someone that we honestly talked about in the show a little bit earlier because the handcuff time might be sooner rather than later. Braelon Allen, Faraz, someone who, again, maybe didn't carry the highest draft capital or anything, but has looked good with his touches this year. And again, just based on his status as a very big, large man, seems like he does have the capability of playing across all 3 downs.
Big, large, fast man is Braelon Allen, right? Like I hope people were already rostering him this week because Breece Hall hasn't practiced the last 2 days. And Braelon Allen is still widely available in a lot of leagues. So one thing I found interesting last week with Breece Hall a little bit banged up with that knee injury is that Isaiah Davis got in the mix a little bit, right? And while Allen is the guy I want, obviously, in this backfield, maybe we shouldn't be surprised if Davis is a bit involved as well. That's not something I would have expected before last week, before we saw that usage. He got some touches around the goal line. He ended up scoring on a reception. So that's not something that I thought would happen. I thought Braelon Allen would just come in and be the guy, no questions asked. But Isaiah Davis, FCS legend. If I'm looking at running backs in the FCS, I'm looking at these guys who are like uber efficient. He was one of those guys. So he's no scrub, right? Just because he didn't play in the FBS. So I can see it. I can see him working in a little bit. But Davis, it might not be at the premium handcuff we thought he was, early on, like maybe in the first 4 weeks of the season. If you look at what he's done lately, he hasn't really been too efficient. He hasn't really given coaches a reason to take away touches from Breece Hall over the last, 10 weeks or so. So I think, that being said, I think Braelon Allen is one of the top handcuffs just because we know that he is capable of those big plays. He is capable of getting a large workload as well.
All right, I got one more for you, Faraz. Now, this one's not as easy, I don't think, but when we look at Kamani Vidal for the Chargers, we like the team. They've got Gus Edwards starting right now. We've got J.K. Dobbins on IR. Last week, obviously, they gave that lead role to Gus Edwards, but it's not like they gave the guy an every down back. And let's be honest, Gus doesn't look very good, man. He just does not look that good on the field. So the thing I like about Vidal is, man, potentially there's an opportunity to earn more work without an injury to Gus Edwards. So I think that door's open to him, but I'm just wondering, how large of a role do you think a player like Vidal can handle? I know this is always the debate in fantasy land. It's like, oh, Jahmyr Gibbs could never handle a full-time role. Devon Achane can't handle a full-time. Oh, wait, yeah, maybe they can. So where do you stand on Vidal, and what do you think the upside for him looks like if things really ran right?
He did it in college, and I was a fan of him, coming out. And, it was him and Tyrone Tracy, like as the two guys I thought that the later round guys I thought could show something, if they received some opportunity. Tracy just beat out Singletary straight up, right? Obviously a lot slower in the process for Vidal. He had a couple running backs to beat. But, Gus Edwards, like you said, he doesn't have the juice. There's obviously some things the coaches like when it comes to what he brings to the table, but there's zero playmaking ability there, right? Vidal, he had that infamous 30-yard reception several weeks ago. He did have a big play in the run game last week, right? So that's good to see. So I kind of want to have him on my bench this week. Obviously you have the contingent upside of if in case Gus Edwards gets hurt, but like you mentioned, Dwayne, like there is a chance that he ends up just outplaying Gus, or the coaches come in and say, okay, let's see what we got in Vidal, and from the get kind of give him more touches early on without having to prove it. In that scenario, you're like, oh, maybe I could start this guy in week 15, right? And that's why I want to have him on my bench now, because I kind of want to beat everyone to waivers in case that scenario ends up playing out.
And hopefully Hassan Haskins is just out of the picture after that fumble last week,
God.
man. The dude comes in, steals these 1-yard touchdowns, and then reminds me of that horrible, Thanksgiving Saturday back in Ann Arbor a few short years ago. Not a great time for us Columbus, Ohioans these days. But for us, again, those were 4 pretty, prominent handcuffs: Tajay Spears, Tyler Algier, Braelon Allen, and Kamani Vidal. Of course, there are another handful of guys who are right now available in over 75% of leagues of most shapes and sizes. So got a little graphic up for our lovely YouTube fan. But yeah, guys, Trey Benson, Ray Davis, Roshan Johnson, a couple more names, Blake Corum as well. I would say someone that, again, if you can find the room on the bench, go ahead and make a move. But did want to quickly ask you about Trey Benson for Oz, because again, had the draft capital, had the profile that we really liked, but it is James Conner's backfield, unless God forbid it isn't. And then you start looking at that schedule, man, it becomes pretty easy to get excited about the rookie.
Yeah, and they just extended him too, James Conner, right? So it's like all of our dynasty shares are in shambles at this point, But yes, he's somebody who's done the opposite, of what I've been talking about lately, and that's he's shown efficiency on his touches, over the last several weeks, and he's taken away some touches from James Conner. I'm not necessarily overly worried about James Conner's workload moving forward or anything like that, because he's still getting enough to get it done as a high-end RB2. But hey, like Trey Benson is somebody that I'm excited about. I was very excited about. I had him kind of neck and neck with Jonathan Brooks, coming into this draft class, coming into the year as rookie. So I'm a fan, and I think he would have tremendous, potentially league-winning upside if Conner were to go down.
Dwayne, I believe you said Cardinals' best RB schedule the rest of the way, and Blake Corum and company not too far behind.
Yeah, second best. Like if we're looking, it's the Titans first. So we already talked about Tajay Spears. Then it would be the Cardinals, but number 4 on the list would be the Rams for Blake Corum. And Blake Corum also carving out a little bit more of a workload here over these last few games. Kyron's still clearly in the lead, so not worried about his workload, just like what Faraz talked about with James Conner. But yeah, Corum is the one though that when I look at it, I feel like, man, if we did see Kyron Williams win the lottery, not get hurt, wins the Powerball, decides he doesn't need to play football for a couple of weeks, man, I feel like we would instantly have him right there in that borderline running back 1 conversation, just because the Rams don't have anything else. Like we've got Ronnie Rivers. Like, is that a real person or is that someone that like plays somebody in a movie? Like I feel like this would be all his backfield. And we know what Sean McVay can do whenever he decides to feed somebody. So Corum, I think, is really a name to remember as well. If some of the other names we talked about are gone, I think you could argue that he's at the top of this list. It really comes down to who gets hurt or wins the Powerball ultimately. But I like all the guys we talked about.
Faraz, great stuff, my friend. Again, everyone can catch you over at Upper Hand Fantasy. Anything else you want to get off your chest, my friend?
No, I just appreciate you guys. Listen, I am a huge fan of all the content that you guys are putting out. Huge fan of you guys, just in general as human beings. So I appreciate you guys having me, and hopefully we can do this again.
Absolutely, man. We are big fans of you as well. And again, please go check out all of Faraz's great work. Up next, though, Dwain and I are going to try to not be wrong on some bold predictions this week. So let's get after it. Man, but Dwain, we got some work to do on our bold calls. We are now 24, 23, and 5 on the season. Last week, we as a team went 2 and 4. One of us happened to say Bucky Irving and Marvin Harrison Jr. The other one, Tank Dell and Kenneth Walker. All right, I messed up. I'll give Dwain some credit here. You've been doing good, my friend. And accordingly, man, lead us off with your first bold call ahead of week 14.
Hey, there have been weeks where you've carried us. It is teamwork, right? It doesn't always work out that way each week. It might be one of us carrying each other, but you've definitely carried us weeks too. So teamwork. We were batting like 600 at one point. We're hanging on to over 500 right now. But I'm going to go with Calvin Ridley. I feel really good about this one this week, so I'm not going to play it too cute here. He's got an 8.2 utilization score, Ian, since DeAndre Hopkins left this team. If you guys go check out over FantasyLife.com, I wrote a whole article that just tells you how the utilization score work and what it means. It's a 0 to 10. 8.2 is really good. That's usually a wide receiver 2 for a season, and wide receiver 2s, when they get good matchups like this one against the Jaguars, Ian, guess what they can turn into? Wide receiver 1s. I think that's what you have with Calvin Ridley this weekend. So I'm going to say 7 catches for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Jaguars defense, giving up the second biggest boost to the fantasy position at wide receiver, number 1 for quarterbacks. So it's good all around. Will Levis is going to definitely hit Calvin Ridley. We got some big plays coming.
It'd be nice to finally get a Calvin Ridley boom week, and actually in a week where we're all actively trying to play him, because he's had some good ones, man, but always seems to come again into tougher matchups. So please, Ridley, make this layup. I'm going to go with a Giants player. That is scary to say out loud. I get it. But guys, running back Tyrone Tracy, let's face it, he is a talented rookie serving as basically the only consistent source of goodness in this offense, with all due respect to Malik Neighbors. And other than Malik Neighbors, they really have very few other places to go with the football. And he's actually set up in a solid matchup against a run funnel defense at home. So yes, I am going to be interested in that. So even if you don't believe me, let the record show before we started recording today that Dwain said that he did have my 2 poll calls on his short list. So again, even if you're not loving your boy recently, Dwain is also backing Mr. Tracy this week. So 120 total yards and a trip to the end zone. Sign me up for that. Dwain, poll call number 2. Let's hear it.
Yeah, Jacoby Myers. I mean, I don't know how bold this one is. Like, it's bold, like in just the context of, if we look at the entire season, we're like, hey, Jacoby Myers is a wide receiver 1 this weekend. But most of the industry is on this one. But I'm going to go with it because he's a guy that we've been talking about for well over a month now, and I haven't used a bold call on him. So why not use it on the week where I think it is going to work out? Since the departure of Devontae Adams, averaging 15.1 fantasy points per game. So 8.1 utilization score, right there in that same range as Calvin Ridley. Notice these 2 guys have something similar going on for them. One lost DeAndre Hopkins from the offense. The other lost Devontae Adams, and they're good target earners on their own, and that has really pushed them up the ranks. And if we look at it, Ian, he's been hyper consistent, man. We talked about this a little bit on the show yesterday with Friedman. He's got 1 wide receiver 1 finish, 5 wide receiver 2 finishes, no wide receiver 3s, and then 2 wide receiver 2s. So that wide receiver 4. So wide receiver 4, if that's your floor and your ceiling is you can get one of these wide receiver 1 games, but usually a wide receiver 2, again, that's a recipe for whenever you get the matchup like we've got this weekend against the Buccaneers, who are giving up the 2nd most passing yards per game on the slate with 6 teams off. They give up a fantasy boost of 4.3 points per game to the wide receiver position. One of the better marks in the NFL. So I will take Mr. Jacoby Myers looking like I know we love Brock Bowers, but we like Jacoby Myers too. So give me 8 catches for 105 yards and 1 touchdown.
Very good player with a lot of good volume and a good matchup. Can't be hating on that one. And accordingly, I'm riding a similar sentiment with my second bold call. Bills wide receiver Khalil Shakur. Give me 10 catches, 95 yards, 1 touchdown on 11 targets because his chemistry with Josh Allen is really second to none. And accordingly, he has been the Bills' leading target earner all season long. So yeah, we could potentially see the return of Dalton Kincaid and Keon Coleman, but even before they were injured, really was the Shakur show. So going up against a Rams team that has a defense that we've seen so many just boom games from at the wide receiver position, I'm loving that. And I'm also loving the possibility for the Rams to do what very few teams can against the Bills, and that is actually score the football and turn it into a bit of a track meet. So again, not saying the Rams are going to upset the Bills or anything like that, but could see Josh Allen 1 week after being forced to play in all that snow, actually being in the friendly, sunny LA weather and being able to accordingly make a lot of good things happen through the air. So again, Khalil Shakur and Tyrone Tracy for your boy, Dwayne riding with Calvin Ridley and Jacoby Myers having big week 14 booms. We can only hope these come to fruition. So I want to thank you guys for tuning into the Fantasy Life show. Good luck in those matchups, clinch those playoff spots, and we'll be right back here Sunday night to go over everything that happened and again, get you ready for those fantasy playoffs. So for Dwayne, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life show. And until next time, take care, everybody.